Another Kraken win. That means you get another Davy Jones makeshift Davy Jones hat. Apropos, because we have Zaiem Beg of Davy Jones Locker Room joining us for another episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Hope you enjoyed that win as much as Zaiem and I'm sure did. Erica L. Ayala, as I mentioned, Zaiem Beg joining me, the, what do we call it? The captain of Davy Jones Locker Room. Zaiem, how are you?
I am the Jordan Everly of people. I am doing great. How are you doing, Erica?
I'm doing, listen, we talked a little offline, but all in all, things are well. It's just such an injection of joy and energy to be able to talk Seattle hockey with you. Always appreciate you joining me here, collaborating with me on Locked On Kraken. And, we talked about this while we were getting ready to record. I've kind of started a little tradition here on Locked On Kraken. We know that no longer is there the, Jerry Bruckheimer Davy Jones hat. I know, sad face, definitely. It seems as though the NHL has swapped out for some, WWE belts, to each their own, I suppose. But, we here like to defend the deep. So luckily I had a Pirates hat lying around. And I'm wearing it for 2 episodes in a row, Zaiem. And that is because the Seattle Kraken not only took care of Vegas, but they also took care of Columbus. You were there at Climate Pledge Arena for the most recent win. What are your immediate takeaways from that game?
Well, so this was truly a tale of 2 periods. The first period was, I think, the worst period the Kraken have played this season. The Boston first period was really, really bad, but Boston's a much better team. Columbus is not a good team at all. And Seattle was just getting absolutely caved in. All the shots, the very few shots they had were coming from the outside. They generated no expected goal. There was a funny point where the NHL initially credited Jaden Schwartz with a tip-in shot attempt in the blue paint, and that was like the one halfway decent shot that they had that period. And then when we were looking at it intermission, the NHL took it away. So Columbus outshot Seattle 18-6 in that period. Again, Columbus is not a good team, so this was really discouraging. And Seattle has had so much trouble with getting shots, creating traffic net front. During the road trip, when the offense stagnated, a lot of the shots were coming from the outside, and this was the same problem again. They have to be able to also create chances off the cycle. And it reminds me a little bit of like a football team that doesn't do play action well, and so they're just passing from shotgun, which is okay for maybe a couple games until people figure out what's going on, and then they just stop, and so teams have been defending the middle and forcing Seattle to the outside, and they haven't been good at countering that strategy. Then the second period happened, but.
Yeah, and I want to stop before we get into like the better. I want to stop there because this has also been something, Zaiem, and I've talked about it on the show before. Bad starts are not new to this Seattle Kraken team. So now we are going beyond just perhaps one coaching staff versus another in Dave Haxtell versus, Disco Dan Bilesma. This just seems to be the MO of the Seattle Kraken. Like, what's going on with that?
I mean, there were points last year where the Kraken would fall apart spectacularly in the third period. That was kind of a theme for a bit there. So, let's give Haxtell some credit. They waited until the end to completely fall apart versus starting off the game completely falling apart. I don't know which feels worse. Right. Actually, I think the hacksaw way feels worse because when you think you have the win and then anyway.
Yeah. I feel like we got both styles with Dave, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a long season and teams morph over the course of the year, and their identity shifted from a team that blows third period leads to blows the game in the first period. So, not to be too cynical.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not ideal. And it was something that I talked about on yesterday's episode. Yanni Gourde wanting to see the Seattle Kraken attack with pace. That's something that they said was going to be their style, right? Under Disco Dan, was that this is going to be a fast team. In order to play that fast pace, you have to kind of start that way, because it takes more energy to kind of rev up the engine. And we have seen the grit from the Seattle Kraken, especially in the last 2 games, which happened to be wins. The Seattle Kraken had to come back, and win these games. So we'll take that for sure. And it just feels as though there's a little bit left to solve when it comes to this puzzle that is this Seattle Kraken team, once again, with a new coaching staff, but also with enough pieces, I think, Zaiem, to what we were hoping, at least, to be able to transition some of what the good things were and what was working from the Seattle Kraken, and to parlay that and match that with players who were brought in, such as Chandler Stevenson, such as Brandon Montour, and of course, having that injection of youth that comes with Riker Evans and Shane Wright. Now, again, we're talking after 2 back-to-back wins. The Seattle Kraken desperately needed wins and to really cut that losing streak. And, there's still more to be desired. So let's go, since Zaiem, you were in the building. A lot of times I am playing video clips, but since we have you here on the show, I'd like for you to kind of just summarize what the sentiment was and what we were hearing from the players. And then, of course, Coach Bylsma after this win. I mean, how are they feeling about it?
The mood was good. It was good in the locker room. People were... I think there is a quiet confidence. The last year, the Kraken did not come back from a 2-goal deficit at any point. The entire season, out of 82 games. The Kraken have played 16 games this year, and they have come back from a 2-goal deficit 3 times now, including the last 2 games. So last year, when they were down, it was like, well, that's it. This one's over, because it was.
Yeah.
This year, it's not the case, and this is so Firebirds-esque. This is just watching the next evolution of from Charmander to Charizard. I think that's the evolution. I'm trying to fake my Pokemon knowledge here.
I mean, I knew what you were going for. I cannot corroborate, I cannot affirm or confirm or deny the order, but I knew what you were going for.
But that's what the Firebirds would do. They would go down, and you just never felt like they were out of it, because they would find a way to just the puck is in the zone, and then all of a sudden it's just going the other way, and then the puck's in the back of the net, and you're like, whoa. Yeah. And that's the same thing happened again last night. They looked so bad in the first period. The second period starts, and they come out, and they are now getting to the middle. They're now getting to the dirty areas of the ice.
Yeah.
They're getting shots net front. The first high danger shot was Ty Cartier's goal that they credited for starting the comeback. He was named first star, which I thought was a really interesting choice, and I don't hate it. And it was like, wait, what? You don't look anything like the team you were in the first period. I mean, so Seattle was outshot 18-6, and those 6 were low quality shots. In the second period, Seattle outshot Columbus 20-8, and Seattle was getting many high quality shots, and there were 4 goals scored in that period. So it was just like, what is this team? At least with Dave Haxtell, you knew what you were getting for the most part, and you might not have liked what you're getting, but with this, it's like, man, it's sometimes they just look so bad, and sometimes they look so good, and it happens in the same game. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way teams are playing them and finding ways to create chances that are not just off the rush. And I think that is the core thing that has been Seattle's struggles this year, of when they have struggled offensively, and how well they solve this problem and how well they choose to focus on that and implement it going forward is going to be the key to whether this team gets in the playoffs or not.
That's so interesting. And I had 2 thoughts. One, which we're going to save for the next segment. But I have a follow-up that I want to ask, because I want to make sure you and I are thinking the same thing and that we are expressing this to the audience. But, can you break that down? Like, what is it exactly that you mean when you're saying and expressing that this team can get it done sometimes, and then other times they just don't? Like, what are some of the areas of the game that you feel the Seattle Kraken just lack that consistency, and quite honestly, I would say the discipline to be consistent in order to maybe prove that they can be a contender, and to prove that, maybe kind of sort of they are a good hockey team?
So I think last night is such an interesting and telling example, and kind of a microcosm of what the Seattle Kraken are and have been the last few weeks. Look, and Coach Bilesma talked about this in postgame, and he's a lot more candid than Dave Haxtell was with strategy. And he said that, look, one of the differences between the first and the second period was that they knew that Columbus was going to play aggressively with their defensemen, and they're going to pinch in. And Seattle was their counter strategy was to do what Seattle wants to do, which is, take advantage of the over aggressive defensemen, get the puck behind them, and then get the puck moving the other way in transition.
Yep.
This is a very good strategy, but strategy and execution aren't the same thing. So the thing was, mostly they were not connecting on their passes, and everything else was not working. And I do like that. Then in the second period, they still stuck with the game plan, because, so imagine, I'm going to use an analogy here, a little off the rails, but so imagine this is a rock, paper, scissors tournament. Yeah. And your opponent, their Twitter handle is Paper Lover 2000, and they think every show should be The Office. And they did their doctoral dissertation on letter versus legal and the benefits thereof. And you're now playing against this person, and you're like, you know what? I think scissors is probably the way to go. Maybe not so much rock this time.
Right.
But then you go, and your scissors are dull, and they're not cutting the paper. Now that's right. You don't switch to rock. That's dumb, because even if you do it well, you're still going to lose. The scissors at least gives you a chance, but like you're holding with the wrong hand, and you accidentally stab yourself in the hand with it, and then and so you have to stop and get a bandage, and but this is the right idea. And then in the second period, during the first intermission, you sharpen the scissors, you practice on your cutting technique. You're like, okay, right. And then now second period starts, and you're like, okay, we still have the right game plan. Didn't deviate, didn't panic, didn't start throwing a bunch of rock out there. We're doing what we are confident we know we can do, and we can be a sharp pair of scissors. And then they cut up the Columbus defense in the second period.
Yeah, and you talked about Ty Cartier perhaps being the engine for that, the impetus for that. I want to talk about some other players, because Zaim, you and I were talking a little bit offline. I've talked about this on Locked On Kraken, but there are some decisions that are looming for this Seattle Kraken team. You have Ding Dong Daniel Sprung walking his way from Vancouver. If you let Dan Bilesman tell the story, but he will be cleared. Eventually, Vince Dunn will come back eventually. So, what does that mean for this roster as constructed now? Because what we do know, Zaim, given the salary cap and even just the roster size of the Seattle Kraken, something has got to give. And I guess now what we're going to try and talk about on Locked On Kraken is what we think can or maybe even should happen. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts side-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NHL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. Minimum purchase may apply. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by our friends at Select Quote. The World Series, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. You invest so much time to take care of yourself and be the healthiest, best version of you. Select Quote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover less, while Select Quote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You could get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. So head to selectquote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Get the right insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL.
So Daniel Sprung has a $950,000 salary. So the Kraken, when Vince Dunn comes back, they're going to be about $1 million over the cap. And with 22 players on the roster instead of the normal 23.
Yep.
I think it's the two names that have been kind of kicked around: Brandon Tanev and Yanni Gourde, and then possibly a third now which becomes a little bit more likely with the addition of Sprong, is Ellie Tolvanen. It's a shame because the Tanev Gord line has been outstanding. Brandon Tanev looks the best he has ever looked in a Kraken uniform. He is super fast as always, but his whole issue has been finishing, and he is now getting the puck in the net. But it's not just finishing. That line has just been so dominant. I think they had 100% of the shot quality when they're on the ice against Vegas.
Correct.
Right? They are, and you're in this position where you're probably going to have to blow that up.
Right.
When Vince Dunn, I don't know how close he is to coming back. It sounds like a couple weeks. I did walk by him last night, and I was like really looking to see, like, are you limping? Are you like holding anything? Is anything injured? He looked fine. So I don't know what that means. I'm not a doctor. So my parents wanted me to be one, but I'm not. So I don't know what's going on, but he wasn't limping. So whatever that's worth. Anyway, clearly they have a plan. I don't think that Ron Francis is doing this without thinking what the next step is. That's generally not his MO.
Right.
So I think that they have a plan in place. And if you're looking at the realities of the roster construction where the hand is forced, someone has to be dealt. It is a good thing that Tanev is playing really well, because if he's the one who gets traded, that increases his value significantly.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a part of me, just seeing things play out in real time, has been like, well, Tanev has effectively been on a tear. In the Vegas game, that was evident. Gets another point against Columbus. To your point, that fourth line of the Seattle Kraken was by far the most effective and efficient. Another thing that I had talked about in the offseason, Zaiem, is that who can the Seattle Kraken realistically get rid of? The way the season went last year, the way a player like Tanev played last year, what is the trade value? Like, what is the value that player brings in that situation and scenario? So now with this kind of emergence back to being able to be effective and perhaps, really constructing that line to be impactful, you give yourself options as an organization. And so I'm really grateful that you mentioned that, because, I think I'm not sure, maybe I'm the only one. I doubt that I'm the only one that's like, hey, but he's playing well. How do we get rid of him? But you have to look at the whole host of the collection and the body of work. And I do think that among the names that you outlined, Brandon Tanev, Yanni Gourde, and Ellie Tolvanen, if we look at the full body of work, Tanev seems to be the player that that makes the most sense to try and move from a Seattle Kraken perspective. But to your point, looking at what the salary cap situation is, I mean, how much does Tanev or, what other moves have to be made to be able to free up some of this salary? Because Daniel Sprong will be with the Seattle Kraken. At least that is the idea, right? And we don't know if the Seattle Kraken, and some of this is dependent on where Vince Dunn is, but we don't know if the Seattle Kraken will have a little bit of time with Daniel Sprong to figure that out. Like, everything might have to happen all at once, Zaiem. Or at least that's how it seems that's a possibility. That's definitely a possibility for the Kraken.
Yeah, I think that the Kraken will have a little bit of warning when the salary cap comes back down, because Vince Dunn will have to start skating again. I'll start practicing. Yeah. So it's not like he's going to be inserted in the lineup surprise one day. So we'll have some warning signs, but the salary cap, it's inevitable. It is coming. It is looming. It is going to force the Kraken to make a roster move. When they made that Daniel Sprong trade, they burned the bridges and there's no going back. So that money has to be accounted for somehow. And that means somebody has to move off the roster. So,
Yeah. I mean, Daniel Sprong, obviously a forward. I mean, do you see any world in which there's another move made or another several moves made, and maybe there are some players that we're not talking about that are not a like for like, because Daniel Sprong, that was future considerations to Vancouver in exchange for Daniel Sprong. So what that means for the Seattle Kraken now, well, we literally don't know. But I wonder if maybe there are a few different moves. Does Ron Francis make a trade with another team? Maybe get a few other players, including maybe a blue liner or two, and then that gives him options. I mean, I don't know. But again, I just my take is that the Seattle Kraken seem to like to do things pretty neat and packaged. I don't know that they're going to want to make a bunch of different moves like in a short period of time. I mean, that's just my read, though, Zaiem. What are your thoughts on? Could we see multiple moves, or do you think this more so will be a like for like? Effectively, put another way, like, do we think the defensemen are safe?
I think the defensemen are probably pretty safe. There isn't a lot of depth there to draw on from Coachella Valley. And so I think that the 7 defensemen that the Kraken have are the 7 defensemen the Kraken have.
Yeah.
If somebody came available is like a value proposition, which is how the Kraken acquired Oliver Bjorkstrand or Ellie Tolvanen, they weren't going after them. They just kind of came available for cheap. And Seattle Kraken had some salary cap flexibility back in those days. And so they used that
those were the days.
I know. I'm just, it's
how quick we
every
grow
time
up.
I look at the cap sheet, every time. Anyway. And so I don't think that it would have to be, as you said, kind of a convoluted, or not a convoluted, but a series of moves. And that's not how the Kraken have generally done things. Right. I don't see any weird 3-way trades or anything like that. So probably, I mean, it just might just be moving it forward for some draft picks. Because, I mean, you might be able to get a defenseman back for depth, cheap one, but you're trying to save cap room. So getting a quality player back doesn't really doesn't solve your problem. So your best option is getting draft capital for who you're trading for.
Yeah. And I mean, it's going to be interesting because, if we look at like you said, 975 is what Daniel Sprong is going to cost. But then you have Ellie Tolvanen at 3,475, Brandon Tanev at 3,500, Yanni Gourde at 5,166. So again, those are just the players that we have heard maybe could be a part of this. If you want to read into some of the healthy scratches, then we go to Oliver Bjorkstrand. 5.4 is what he's making for the next 2 seasons. And then you go to Ty Cartier, who he alone doesn't even cover the Sprong salary because he's at 859,000 and some change there. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Seattle Kraken go with this. I don't see this being some, again, extravagant kind of trade. I think you and I agree, but something has to happen. We have also been talking, of course, of Philip Grubauer, who showed up. And when I saw the images of him at the skills event, I honestly, it took me several minutes to realize that I was looking at Philip Grubauer. So, I mean, glad to see that he seems to be in good spirits and around the team. Glad to see that, he wasn't too much worse for the wear from whatever incident happened at home, but it was also kind of like, whoa, all right, bro, like dodge something there. But yeah, I mean, that's another player, at least right now, that we don't have access to, which Stenska's been coming in really just to be that extra body for Joey Daccord. But I do want to talk about Joey Daccord coming up on today's episode because another quality start. I mean, and we love to see it, right? We love to see Joey Dax thriving. And no Philip Grubauer, at least for right now. That doesn't give Joey Daccord much rest. He has to be that guy for us. And again, we've seen this storyline, this narrative, this movie run its course for the Seattle Kraken. So Zaiem, coming up, I want to hear from you again. Do we have concerns about Joey Daccord and the workload that he's being expected to shoulder, especially given that the Seattle Kraken offense hasn't exactly been exemplary? Today's episode of Locked on Kraken also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you placed your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League and us here at the Locked On Podcast Network.
Well, the Kraken have a back-to-back this weekend, so we will find out how ready Grubauer will be, because if he's not, then we're going to see Stezka.
Yep.
Probably on Sunday against the Rangers.
Which is Rangers, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is the best team that they're playing, and so maybe you just say, like, okay, we're going to take the loss here, or the expected loss. The Islanders are pretty injured, and the Blackhawks are bad. It is maybe not crazy to see Stezka against the Blackhawks. I don't think that's super likely, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it is now becoming clear that Joey is the starter and Grubauer is the backup. And my expectation is Grubauer will probably be bought out at the end of the year, and Joey Daccord will be the long-term starter, which, he has been really, really good. On Money Puck, I just pulled this up today. He is 4th in goal save above expected, behind Lucas Dostal and Connor Hellebuck, who is, pretty great, and then Frederick Anderson, but he only has four starts there. But Joey's been good, and it's not like he has been. Sometimes you look at a goalie and it's like, well, the team they missed a bunch of shots, or they hit the post 3 times, and the goalie was out of position, but they just like whatever. That's not the case here. His fundamentals are so strong. His dad's a goalie coach. That certainly reflects there. He really works a lot on the details. I think my favorite thing about him is that he challenges shooters. He's aggressive, but he's not too aggressive. He really finds that sweet spot where he reduces the chances of the shot going in without leaving himself open to like a counter move. Joey's been playing much better than Grubauer, and they just signed him to an extension. Yep. So clearly he is the future of the Kraken. And I think that they're now establishing him in that role.
Yeah. And you talked early on about the buyout. I mean, this is something that there is a sector of Seattle Kraken fans that have been wanting this for a while. And I don't think that it was necessarily warranted. I mean, in fairness, Zaiem, I don't want to say that it's not warranted, but I also kind of don't want to say that it is. I think this is just the circumstance of where the Seattle Kraken are with the salary cap, not above 500, and something has got to give. So the buyout for Philip Grubauer, something we've talked about on Locked on Kraken for a while, because it just seemed that if the Seattle Kraken couldn't turn things around, Zaiem, that again, like I just said, that contract was going to be one of, if not the contract that the Seattle Kraken and certainly outsiders are going to look to and say, well, you got to make a move. Then I think we know who you got to move. Now again, that's not likely going to be something that happens in the season. You got to rock with who you got. Especially, I mean, my take is, you don't unless you absolutely have to. Who's doing that? Goalie trades in the middle of the season. I just don't. Yeah.
I think trading him is a really, really unrealistic scenario. He's making $5.9 million, and he's at this point he is an average to a below average goaltender. Yeah. I love Philip Grubauer. He's always been one of my favorite players, even before he joined the Kraken. And it pains me, to say this, but he's just not very good right now.
Yeah.
And so nobody is going to take that contract. No one's going to trade for him. It's just too big, and people don't have cap room. I mean,
yeah.
So even if some team really, really liked Philip Grubauer, they may not realistically be able to get him.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot going on in Kraken land right now. And this is also while we have a team that's still, quite honestly, figuring out how to win games. The consistency is not there. What we've been hearing players say multiple times over is to be predictable. And again, that's predictable to each other. Obviously, you don't want to be predictable to the opposition, although arguably the Kraken are exactly that. But keeping it simple, communication, tape to tape is something that we heard Yanni Gourde say. Early starts is what we heard him say also, Yanni Gourde. That didn't happen in Columbus, but you have another bite at the apple against Chicago. You and I are going to stay on to talk a little bit more Kraken hockey, but let's close out this conversation as we do all of our shows, reminding people to be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say, let's go Kraken, Chicago. We're ready for you.